In this section, we're going to turn to methodological issues in business ethics. Bottom line for business ethics case studies is what's the right thing to do, right? Or what's the best thing to do? And so we're concerned with the content of the case. But every case in business ethics involves controversy with different perspectives, arguments back and forth, many facts to integrate and so forth. So issues of keeping things straight, how we analyze, how we keep track of all of the data, arguments, and counter-arguments is also important. So what I want to do is turn to methodological issues about how to organize and analyze a case study. And what we will be doing here is abstracting from the content of any particular case to focus on structural issues in organizing the data and the arguments. Now, one way, of course, in which business ethics issues are controversial is not just that we have different ideas about what the right thing to do is or what the best thing to do is, but that almost every business ethics case is a multi-dimensional case study, right? That is to say that there's not typically just one issue about which there is controversy. And the assertion I want to make at the beginning is, and we've indicated here on the board, that almost all business ethics cases involve looking at three different types of sub-issues. One type of issue is going to be purely an ethics issue. What is the good? What is the bad? What is the right standard of value to apply? And we have debates in ethical theory about what good ethics involves. Another aspect of the case will typically be controversy over the economics, the facts on the grounds. How do we look at the business situation and what are the right economic principles to apply in this particular case? And also, there's almost always a political dimension. That's not to say that every business ethics case has a political component, but typically as the 20th century went on, the economy got more complicated, business as a field got more complicated, business ethics, right, as a field became more professionalized. All of these strands together involved seeing politics as a significant component for good or for bad in understanding how business operates. And then, of course, we have debates and controversies over the proper function of government and what it should or should not do in any particular case. So the first point is that in every business ethics case, we should look for a controversy over the ethics issues, a controversy over the economics issues, and a controversy over the politics issues. And every complete case study is going to involve attending to and reaching a resolution on those three dimensions of the case. Now, if we drill down within each of these areas to the particular controversies, what we find in ethics, there is pretty much a standard three-way debate that goes on in this area, and we should look to the standard language or terminology that can tip us off to the ethical principles that one side or the other is bringing to bear. So, for example, in ethics, one of the standard positions is egoism. And the core concepts involved in egoism are a fewfold. One is a fairly robust individualism, right? That we see individuals as the unit of analysis, as the unit of action, and what we do is see individuals robustly as ends in themselves. That is to say, each individual's life is his or her own. They should set their own ends or strive for their own ends, determine what their core values are, what their core goals are in life. And also, we see individuals in this case fairly strongly as being self-responsible. What your goals are in life are yours to set, but also they are yours to achieve, right? And that is then a two-dimensional individualism. Another standard position in ethics is a position that we label predation. As the name suggests here, this is a darker view of human relationships. And what predators will do, or advocates of predation, is not to advocate a robust individualism. Instead, what they will do is say we need to divide the world into the strong versus the weak. And their sympathy is with the strong. What you want to do in the struggle between the strong and the weak is be a member of the strong, protect yourself from other strong parties, but also to see the weak as your opportunities to engage in self-advancing behaviors. And so what you're doing is then seeing other people as the means to your ends. right? And so the others are the means, and the self, right, is the end, right? And so the idea here is, as predators want to do, is you don't want to absorb any of the costs yourself, if at all possible. Instead, you want other people to bear the costs. And then you use them in order to achieve whatever ends you want to achieve. The other standard position disagrees with both egoism and predation, and in its strongest form we give it the label of altruism. Typically, altruism also sees the world as divided into strong versus weak. Right, but their sympathies are typically with the weaker, the poorer, the helpless, those who have been exploited, victimized, right, and so forth. And instead of preying on those people as predators want to do, what they will typically advocate is that you see those others, right, as the end. That one has an obligation, right, to serve others, to sacrifice, right, for the sake of others, particularly the weaker others, right, to protect them in various ways. So it's the others, right, who are the end, and the self, right, is the means, right. I am a servant, or my obligation is in strong form to sacrifice when necessary, right, for those people. So what we have, if we then put a single label here, this position will say it's up to you, so to speak, to make your own life and to make your own way in the world, to become the person you want to be. And so this emphasis is always on creation, right? Self-creation, and then creating whatever you need out in the world in order to realize yourself. Here, the focus is on taking, right, from other people. Other people do the producing, the creating, and one finds a way through fraud or physical force to get what you want from them. And here the emphasis is on giving, right? Giving of oneself, even to the point of giving of one's life in order that others can benefit. All right, so we have a three-way debate then between egoists, predators, and advocates of altruism over what it is to be a good person, what one's top values should be, what in principle one's relationships to the world and other people should be, characterized differently by these concepts. When we turn to business ethics cases, what we'll then find is those who disagree over whether we should be applying an egoist standard to analyze the case, or a predatory standard to analyze the case, or an altruistic standard to apply the case. Or if we're looking for what's the best solution, should the best solution be guided by an egoist outcome, a predatory outcome, or an altruistic outcome. All right, now let's turn to the economics. The economics profession is also divided over many issues, obviously many issues of detail and policy and so forth, but even the broader issues of what economics is about and how we should think about our economic circumstances strategically, there is a deep divide within the profession. One side of the profession will say that if we're interested in what economics is first and foremost the study of, right, or the science of production, right? How do we create value in the world? How do we add value to the world? How do we transform natural resources, right, in a way that is better? And the other side of the debate will be to say that primarily economics is an issue of distribution. Economics is how we decide, right, or how we study who gets what, right, in the business and economic sphere. The people who are more on the side of production will typically emphasize that we live in a world, right, of plenty, right, or a world of potential plenty. Given that we are smart creatures, we can engage in productive activities, we can make the world a better place. And so the economics is how we add value or increase, right, the next net stock of values that are in the world. The other side of the profession will often take scarcity, right, as its defining concept. The idea that we do not have enough resources, so to speak, to go around, or that the demand for resources outstrips their potential supply. And so that then ties into the question of only being able to decide, so to speak, who's going to get one. And typically we are going to be assuming that it is a zero-sum game. If we're characterized by scarcity, supply is not adequate to meet demand, then not everybody is going to get what they need, and so necessarily we are in a zero-sum world. And so it's just a question of distributing the scarce resources available. The other side, it emphasizes our productive abilities, and the potential plenty out there is then typically more optimistic, right, economically, and it will typically say that the standard case in economics or business scenarios should be a win-win. Right, and that cases of zero sum, of course, can happen, but they are the aberrant case. And of course, this side will recognize that there can be win-win transactions, but they will see those as the minority cases or the aberrant cases. So what we have then is a polarization, and this is a polarized characterization, and there can be positions along a spectrum here between those who emphasize economics as the science of productivity, of increasing the net stock of resources in a plenty way, and win-win, right, distribution as a result, versus the side that emphasizes a scarcity of resources, our zero-sum predicament, and then questions of distribution as what economic studies in that broader context. Finally, and more obviously, when we turn to political issues, obviously there are deep conflicts over whether we need a government, and to the extent that we do need a government, what kinds of things a government should do. And so at one side we have a position that advocates for a fairly limited government position, right, that there are certain functions that governments can do, perhaps protection of life, liberty, and property, but we place limitations on the power of government, and we see the vast majority of what goes on in society, and then more broadly even than that in each individual's life as a whole, is not the business of government. Instead, those are things that we work out as individuals, or we work out through various voluntary social mechanisms that we create. Since we're focusing on business and economic issues here, this position will then typically say that economically we should have a free market. It would be the job of the government to protect people's lives, to do with what they wish, right, to be free in the economic sphere, to engage in activities as producers and consumers, whatever they wish, to use their property, right, as they wish, and then the result of that is whatever individuals decide to do under those broad framing constraints and enabling conditions, that will be the free market result, and that's what we should strive for. Obviously, the other end of the perspective takes a more robust role of government, arguing for a position that is broadly construed as socialism, that all of life is social, or everything should be socialized, that we should see ourselves as a community or as a larger commune, and our interest is not on individuals, but rather primarily, but society as a whole, and government is our institution that represents or embodies, right, society as a whole. And so it's not a matter of individuals doing whatever they choose to do, right, in a free market. Instead, we need to have a government that manages the economy as a whole, deciding what's going to be produced, what's going to be consumed, how goods in that position, or in that economy rather, are distributed. Now again, we have a polarized debate here, and there's a middle position that most contemporary Western societies represent. They're neither limited government free markets, although there are many advocates, right, of that position, nor is the economy a centralized government-managed socialist one, but rather that what we have is a position that's in the middle, that we have some sort of mixed economy, and the mixed economy is characterized by what we call interventionism. So the idea here might be, or will be, right, in many cases, that we have a significant amount of free market, right, but when appropriate, the government will intervene to perhaps set prices or restrict property rights in various ways, or establish various kinds of regulations. It doesn't go as far then as trying to manage, right, the economy as a whole, or to nationalize private property or take over existing businesses, but rather just to intervene, right, at various strategic points. Or it might be a position that is sometimes known as paternalism, right? That we see individuals as being the rightful owners of their own lives and being free to a significant extent and having their own property to a significant extent. But in various cases where we think they are making mistakes or that they are likely to make mistakes, we will have regulations or oversight in place that will, in a paternalistic, hopefully benevolent fashion, help people manage their own lives. And so it's a more robust involvement of government in various economic and business spheres, but it doesn't go so far as socialism. On the other hand, we're not leaving people in as laissez-faire a position as advocates of free markets would want. So what we again have is a perspective then that runs from limited government to interventionism, and from interventionism to socialism at the other end of the debate. So the overall takeaway point here is that when we go into studying particular business ethics cases, what's the right thing to do, whether it's a case in pharmaceuticals or employer-employee relations, or what the price of rental property should be, or whether we should have regulations on telecommunications, right, and so forth. All of those different business ethics cases will be about different business values. But the point will be that in all of those cases, abstracting away from the content, there's going to be an ethics debate over what the right ethical principles are to bring to bear on the case, what the right economic analysis of the situation is, what the right involvement in understanding what's going on in the business ethics case or as the proper solution, and people then will bring different background assumptions in many cases to bear on the particular case. And that is why we have the controversies that we do, but all of those controversies are not simply unidimensional. It's very rare that we have a business ethics case that is cut and dried, focused on this single issue, and typically every business ethics case we have a disagreement going on about the ethics, a disagreement about the economics, and a disagreement about the politics. And a thorough case study will look at the arguments on both sides or all sides in all three of these areas, present them in a fair-minded fashion, put the strongest arguments up against each other, and then of course the person who is trying to reach a conclusion will make a decision on each of those sub-issues, put it all together in a package, and that is a complete business ethics case study. Now, how that works out is what we will turn to next. We have a series of business ethics cases in particular that we're going to look at. We will apply this methodology to the content issues that are come up in each of those cases and see how they work out both in terms of content and methodology.